Well, welcome back to the next chapter in the sequence in organizational theory and behavior. We are up to chapter 11, and again, that makes for some very good progress. We are approaching the third test out of 4 at the end of the next chapter. So in this particular segment, we will be talking about making decisions. The lecture video that covers the chapter itself is a little over 28 minutes long. And in that video, we will talk about several different models of decision making and when you would use one as opposed to the other, what some of the benefits are of one or the limitations. And those 3 models of decision making are the rational decision making model, when you're able to make logical choices and take into account all the different pieces. The bounded rationality model, as it might suggest, when that rational model has certain boundaries that you've got to work within. You can't have all of the information. You don't have all the time in the world. You're limited somehow. So rational decision making and bounded rationality. And then the third model is the creative decision making. That's more of when you just have to try something new, not within the framework of what we've done in the past, but stepping out on a limb, perhaps, is the expression we would use, and getting creative to solve a problem that we don't really know how to deal with. So those 3 models, and then there are a number of terms that we want to explore a little bit. 3 of them are the idea of analysis paralysis, where we get paralyzed with the process of making the right decision to the point where we don't make progress. Then the second idea is the idea of satisficing, S-A-T-I-S-F-I-C-I-N-G, satisficing based off the word satisfy, which is basically the idea that we don't have to be perfect. We've just got to get good enough to satisfy the basic needs. And then the third idea, later on in the video and in the chapters, the idea of escalation of commitment, which is basically the idea that we should have quit long ago, but we've just been stubborn. We haven't been willing to admit we're wrong, and we keep pursuing a bad idea long past it becomes obvious that it's not a good idea, not workable. Outside of that, we're going to talk in relation to the creativity decision-making progress, how we can create that creativity in our workplace, and what some of the problems are that prevent us from getting there. And the final thing that we'll talk about in the video and in the chapter is the concept of groups. Is it better to make decisions in groups or alone? It depends. We'll talk about why and when. And then what are some of the problems associated with groups making decisions? And one of the biggest things that we'll talk about in that section is the idea of groupthink, which hopefully will prove to be pretty interesting. That's a summary of what's going to happen in the overall chapter lecture video. Outside of that, when you have looked at the chapter video, you've looked over the PowerPoint that goes with it, and you have read the chapter, you will have the standard summary of ideas. And again, remember that what I want you to do is not to kind of give me a step-by-step timeline through the book, but think through all that and pick out a couple of ideas that were interesting and talk really more about what those ideas were that are most helpful to you and how you would apply that in the real world. That we then have our typical quiz, 10 questions. And for this particular chapter, there's only one assessment. It's assessment number 27, and it deals with whether you are a deliberate decision maker or not. The implications of that is the more deliberate you are, perhaps the longer it takes, the less likely you are to satisfy, the more likely you are to engage in or be victim of analysis paralysis, and maybe perhaps the more likely you are to find that escalation of commitment is occurring. When all of that is done, when I have provided a grade or some feedback on the one assessment, assessment 27, you'll be unlocking chapter 12, which is next. Hope that you enjoy all this information about decision making, and because decision making happens regularly all day long throughout our days, throughout our life, perhaps we don't think about the processes too much, and maybe this will open some new ideas of thinking about how we do that. Maybe it'll help us to identify some places where we don't do it very well, or how we can make changes to do it better. and there'll be some benefit to that. Hope you're enjoying it, and I look forward to interacting with you with our videos and the call that's coming up at the end of chapter 12, and that everything's going along according to your plan.